All right, we'll start with Exhibit C, Anderson property purchase.
Good morning, Trevor. Sorry for the silence. So Trevor Watson's going to present on this one for us today.
Yes, well, welcome, Trevor.
Morning. Thank you.
Yeah, we apparently don't have any public testimony on this, so you're up.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. Good morning, Chairman Finley, Commissioners, Deputy Director Hearn. My name is Trevor Watson. I'm the District Manager for the Klamath and Malheur watersheds. I'm here today to seek your approval for the Anderson property acquisition here in Klamath County. So first, a brief outline of what I'll be presenting today. We'll start with a little bit of a description with the Klamath Basin, move into Klamath Wildlife Area, then look at the Anderson property, discuss its funding and the easements that are present on the property. Klamath Basin historically had 185,000 acres of wetlands. Today, it's closer to 36,000, highlighting really the importance of wetlands in this basin. Real quickly, the department owns wildlife areas for wildlife use and public recreation. The Klamath Wildlife Area was purchased in 1953. It was purchased and managed to further the department's mission to protect and enhance fish and wildlife, their habitats, for use and enjoyment by future and present generations. The first two goals of the plan are to protect, enhance, manage upland, wetlands, habitats, with emphasis on reducing depredation on adjacent agricultural lands by spring migrating geese. The third goal is to provide a variety of wildlife-oriented, recreational and educational opportunities to the public that are compatible with goals 1 and 2. The Klamath Wildlife Area, like many other wildlife areas, uses cooperative farming and grazing agreements as a tool for habitat management, which provide opportunities to the local agriculture community. We'll now talk about the Anderson property. The department was approached by the Anderson family to purchase their 214 acres that is adjacent to the Klamath Wildlife Area. The property itself consists of 175 acres of wetlands and 39 acres of upland acres. The aerial photo, as you can see, the Klamath Wildlife Area surrounds it on the east border and the north border, or not on the north border, but there. Anderson property is right there in the red. It has a 1879 adjudicated water right on it for 195 of the acres. The wetlands are maintained by dikes and water control structures for water conveyance as well as management. And last, there's a permanent wetland reserve program easement on the property by NRCS with some work that is going to occur this summer. So we'll talk about the NRCS's wetland reserve program and what it is. Because they purchased 100% or a permanent easement on the property, they purchased that with 100% funds. And the work that's coming up this summer will also be paid at 100% by the NRCS. The goal of the WRP program is to achieve the greatest wetland functions and values and provide optimum wildlife, which is very similar to the department's goals. And if you look, the listed rights at the bottom were the rights retained in the transaction. Funding. So if the acquisition is approved, the department would use waterfowl stamp funds for the purchase. Waterfowl stamp funds may be expended only for activities that promote propagation, conservation, and recreational use for migratory waterfowl. The Anderson property meets these requirements. We're oftentimes asked if we pay taxes. The department pays a payment in lieu of tax to the county, also known as the PILT. As such, the department pays the same amount the previous owner would have, which is assessed annually by the county, so there's no loss to the county. As for benefits, this property would complement the wildlife area goals by continuing to reduce damages to neighboring private agriculture. The property provides early nesting habitat, and being adjacent to the river allows broods to easily disperse. And the property would also increase recreational opportunities on the Klamath Wildlife Area as well as Klamath County. Next are just a few photos of the property. What we have are really a wetlands and an uplands, so the very productive wetlands will draw spring and fall migrating, as well as breeding birds with water present most of the year on the property. The uplands portion of this property provides nesting cover and forage for all sorts of wildlife and will be managed as grasslands for productivity. And with that, I'll take questions now or after public testimony. Thank you very much.
No public testimony. So commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Buckmaster.
Trevor, what is the amount of that we would expect in payment in lieu of taxes?
So that actually, I believe for the Anderson property is, I have the amount, I don't think there's any confidentiality with it. So it's roughly $1,200.
So when we vote on this, we're talking about $1,200 a year of taxes that we're assuming as well by the purchase.
Yes. Yep.
Any others? Commissioner Weber.
I was wondering now, NRCS has been paying for a conservation easement, is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner, yes, they paid for that. It was a one-time payment for the cost of, the offsetting cost of the rest of the property.
Did they acquire any of the water rights, or was that retained by the property owner and we would be purchasing that?
So water rights are retained by the property owner with this program. They will be coming back in this summer to do some wetland restoration work. And with that, they will work with the landowner to make it work for the program as well as the goals for the landowner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then I'm ready to hear a motion.
I move to approve the acquisition of the Anderson property and direct staff to proceed to escrow closing upon completion of all processes required under Oregon law for land acquisition.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Atkinson and seconded by Commissioner Weber. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 5 commissioners present. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right. You can stay there. Please do. All right, we're gonna go to Exhibit D. Edmonds Well, property purchase. Go ahead, Trevor.
All right. Again, good morning, Chair, Commissioners, Deputy Director Hearn. I'll introduce myself again. Trevor Watson. I'm the District Manager for the Klamath and Malheur watersheds. Now I sit in front of you to seek your approval for the Edmunds Well Wildlife Sanctuary property acquisition. In short, the department is proposing to purchase the Edmunds Well Wildlife Sanctuary to in part fulfill a mitigation for impacts for the Ruby Pipeline project. Also, Carol Edmunds wants to sell their partner her property because she feels we are best to maintain the conservation legacy of the wildlife sanctuary created by her and her late husband, Don. Real quick, an outline. I'll start by discussing the Ruby Pipeline project and the mitigation agreements and the impacts. Next, we'll discuss how the purchase of the Edmunds Well Wildlife Sanctuary fits within the management plan of the Summer Lake Wildlife Area, and finish up with highlighting the benefits of the property and what the department plan should the commission approve this acquisition. The Ruby Pipeline, if for those that aren't aware, is the largest pipeline in the western United States at over 42 inches width and diameter. Extends 680 miles, only through Lake and Klamath County to come into Oregon, but 680 miles total, and carries 1.5 billion cubic feet per day. Its construction impacted numerous uplands and riparian habitats in Lake and Klamath counties. The Ruby Pipeline developer agreed to mitigate 7,000 acres of upland, 102 acres of wetlands under the department's habitat mitigation policy. This resulted in $4.86 million total that was provided to two of it, 2.86, was provided to the Lake County Resource Initiative for habitat restoration and riparian and upland habitat restoration. $2 million was provided to the department for property acquisition for the purpose of acquiring lands for the purpose of restoring fish and wildlife habitats. Multiple agencies were involved in this mitigation agreement, and the department has used part of the $2 million to purchase the Woozley tract, which is largely a well, it's on the lower Deschutes and mitigates upland impacts. So we are proposing to spend the remaining part of the Ruby funds, match with some Pittman and Robertson funds, to purchase the Edmonds Well Wildlife Sanctuary as mitigation for riparian and wetland impacts. Before proposing this purchase of the Edmonds Well property, the department considered at least 2 other acquisitions as mitigation, but they were unsuccessful for various reasons. I'm sure you all know, but there are many elements that the department must consider when purchasing property. To name just a few, there needs to be a willing seller with patience, available funds, the property must meet intrinsic values to fish and wildlife that the department fits the department's goals and missions, and the department works to address constituent concerns. Let's talk about the Edmunds Well Summer Lake Wildlife Area. As similar to the Klamath Wildlife Area, all properties the department owns are a mission to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife for current and future generations. Summer Lake Wildlife Area was actually the first wildlife area purchased by the department in 1942. Its current management plan was adopted by the commission in 2007. The first 2 goals are identical to the Klamath Wildlife Areas, is to protect, enhance, and manage uplands and wetland habitats with emphasis on reducing depredation on adjacent agricultural lands. And then goal 3 is to provide a variety of wildlife-oriented recreational educational opportunities to the public that are compatible with goals 1 and 2. So Edmunds Well property would be managed with many of the same strategies utilized on Summer Lake Wildlife Area to accomplish habitat needs for wildlife. Why this property? The Edmunds family built the wildlife sanctuary because of their commitment to the fish and wildlife resource and the education of youth and adults about the resource. Their vision was to provide habitat for wildlife in Summer Lake Basin and have a place where people, especially youths, could enjoy both. At the top left, you can see Don's Edmunds memorial next to Red Rock Pond. It was his hope that the department would continue his legacy. The other pictures are from the sanctuary when they were hosting up to 250 youth annually. Actually provided to us by Carol Edmunds from the sanctuary's website. As you can see, the Edmunds Well property is less than 3 miles northeast. The clicker will use it. So here's the edge of Summer Lake Wildlife Area, about 3 miles northeast of the Edmunds property. It's bordered by federal as well as private properties. Looking closer at the Edmunds Well Wildlife Sanctuary, it consists of over 300 acres of wetlands, including excavated ponds, canals, sand dunes, and dikes. There are approximately 20 ponds ranging from 2 to 35 acres each. Some of the ponds in the past were stocked with rainbow trout and warm water fish. And the wetlands will complement the Summer Lake Wildlife Area goals. The ponds are supplied by 3 artesian wells with more than 1,715 gallon per minute that circulate by gravity flow. There is absolutely no pumping to maintain these ponds on the property. The wetlands are maintained by dikes and water control structures, which provide the opportunity to manage the habitat for various uses and species, which is very important to the wildlife area. There are 3 structures on the property. First, there's the Palmer House, which is a two-story, 3-bedroom house that can provide additional housing for workshops as well as wildlife area needs. There's the Fin and Feather Lodge, 12-bed bunkhouse with 2 bathrooms, and there is a garage/facility center. All facilities are in good condition and not in need of any major repairs. The facilities could be used for information and education purposes, facilitated by the department and OSU as it has in the past. And the activity center could be also used for meetings, seminars, education, workshops. The benefits of this proposed acquisition would benefit Oregon's conservation strategy species by maintaining diverse wetlands. It will increase wetland recreational opportunities in the community and county. It completes Ruby Pipeline's mitigation requirements, expending all funds, and could provide education and outreach opportunities for youth and disabled hunters and anglers. Some more photos of the some of the workshops were held on the bottom left. Our future plan for the property: if the acquisition is approved, staff will update the Summer Lake Wildlife Area management plan and encompass the Edmunds Well property. The property will be wrapped into the current plan, operations without any addition of staff. Staff will work with our information and education program to implement workshops and seminars on the property to further the department's missions and goals. The facilities on the property will be used to accommodate workshops and wildlife area needs for volunteers, seasonals, and full-time staff without housing. And last but certainly not least, the sanctuary has a history of introducing kids to the outdoors and teaching them the importance of fish and wildlife and their habitats if approved. The department plans to continue this as part of the Edmunds family legacy. And at this time, I will take questions now, or we can do that after public testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have, Trevor, we have 7 members of the public signed up to speak. So we'll call you back at the end of that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'm going to invite you up in panels of 3 in the order in which you signed up. And we'll give you 3 minutes apiece. And we'll look forward to hear what you have to say. Jalen Sheffield, Emily Croyling, Jay Orueta. Jalen?
Chandler, hard to see it.
Jalen.
Okay. Here are my notes here. Okay, can I start?
Yep, please.
Okay, commissioners. Chair Weber, Deputy Director Hearn, good morning. My name is Jalen Sheffield. I live at 50805 Sheffield Road, Summer Lake, Oregon, which is 1,300 feet from the Edmunds property. I have acted in positions ranging, excuse me here. I work as an ecologist for the U.S. Forest Service. I have acted in positions ranging from District Ranger to the National Environmental Policy Act Coordinator and Planner to Wildlife Biologist. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Forest Management and a Master of Science degree in Forest Resources from OSU's College of Forestry. I am a director for the Fort Rock Silver Lake Soil and Water Conservation District and serve on the Lake County Planning Commission and on the Lake County Budget Committee. My family is the only permanent residents on Sheffield Road, and we have been the only permanent residents since the 1950s. I am not here today, however, to represent the Forest Service, Lake County Planning Commission, or any other entity other than myself as a Summer Lake community member. The reason I am providing testimony this morning is not to provide support or opposition of the Edmunds acquisition proposal. Rather, I am here to bring information to the State Planning Commission. As you are well aware, everything we do comes down to law, regulation, and policy. I will start first by discussing the Summer Lake Wildlife Management Plan, which is the first page in your handout which I provided. And then I will discuss Lake County Comprehensive Plan, page 2 of your handout. The Summer Lake Wildlife Management Plan of 2007 states on page 36, land adjustments would allow for the sale, trade, or exchange of land with willing landowners to enable a department to consolidate wildlife area boundaries. The 2007 plan clearly does not mention the consideration of private property outside of areas under existing wildlife management boundaries. I have requested that ODFW follow the amendment process if the department wants to pursue this acquisition. The Summer Lake Wildlife Management Plan is a public agreement. If there is an addition to or a reduction of the Summer Lake, ODFW should open the proposed changes up for public comment. To date, this has not occurred and therefore is a change to existing public agreement and ODFW policy. Second, the Lake County Comprehensive Plan of 1980 states on page 24, bullet 15, that the county will generally discourage any additional public acquisitions of private lands unless justifiable by the county. And bullet 16, that prior to any potential private land acquisitions by a public agency, a recommendation will be requested from the county regarding the transaction. According to Lake County's Planning Director, Darwin Johnson, as of Wednesday, October 10th, email correspondent handout, page 3, Lake County has not received a request for recommendation regarding the proposed transaction. Darwin states that he stands by the policy that the county will discourage any additional public acquisition of private lands when there has not been adequate justification to the county to purchase lands. He goes on to state, to my knowledge at this point, this has not been accomplished. Justifiable reasons could be in cases where the state or federal lands completely surround private property. This has not been the case with Edmunds property. There are, however, sections 16 and 36 of many townships and ranges where lands could be acquired, which could be justifiable as it should promote their intent to protect species and habitats such as sage grouse. Darwin provides a list of properties that meet the criteria as presented to the Lake County Comprehensive Plan.
Mr. Sheffield, you're out of time, so summarize, please.
Okay. So with this, obviously the approval of the acquisition today would not follow the policy of Lake County or ODFW. For a community like Summer Lake, where approximately 2/3 of the landowners do not approve this proposal, please consider the message this will send when they read about today's outcome in the newspaper or watch this meeting on YouTube. Again, this has nothing to do with support or opposition. This has everything to do with making sure a public agency follows the county's policy as well as their own. I have also provided letters supporting the majority of the community, which oppose from 2 of the 3 county commissioners.
Thank you.
Commissioners, thank you.
Ms. Kryling?
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Emily Kryling. I am a landowner on Sheffield Road. I just wanted to bring up a couple different topics in that the information handed out said that the budget would be taken away from the current Summer Lake to manage and maintain the buildings and the houses. I'm just wondering if there is a current surplus in the budget to take away from the existing wildlife area. The impact that this would have on Sheffield Road as a county road, the increased usage. There has not been, to my knowledge, any studies done to see what the usage would be, having that rely on Lake County for the maintenance of the road, as well as 2 out of the 3 commissioners siding with the county, or with the Lake County residents and landowners in opposition is, I think, an important aspect to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oriwata?
Commissioners, thank you. Just a few thoughts that I had that I jotted down, and as I was reading in May, when we had a handout that was presented to the community to represent our feelings on the purchase of the property, there was a large margin of folks that were not in favor of it. And I was just curious if that happened to have any impact to the board members, or if you even were aware of that fact. I don't know what you're aware of or not, as far as that questionnaire that was put out for basically a public vote there in the area. And as I stated, a large number, a majority, more than a majority of the folks were against against the purchase. And with that paperwork that came out, they were representing that Ruby Pipeline project and the funds that were going to go forward from that particular project. And also there was, and this was on ODFW paperwork, about the maintenance and any additional costs and such being, as I recall, covered by federal grants. As I believe, grant money has to be applied for, the money has to be there first, has to be applied for, and has to be okayed. You know, you have to be accepted for that grant. I don't know that grants are guaranteed forever to be available, whether we have the need for them or not. So without that, who's going to take the brunt of that? Again, does it fall back to the taxpayer, whether it's a user tax or however that would be accomplished as far as maintenance or expanding or anything of that nature. The other thing that I had concern of is I know there's a large amount of water on the property, and I understand it's from artesian wells, but I'm also curious as to, in the future, would there be any enhancement of those ponds? And if there are, how would that affect the water table in the area? There's a lot of use put on that water table that's in that part of the basin. There we have a large area there. As the other folks had mentioned about the traffic, I was told that in one of the meetings that, well, the state isn't concerned about that. That's a county road. Well, okay, I understand that, but is there any concern on the board about traffic impact? I don't know what the traffic will be like next year or 10 years down the road. I'm curious as to that. And I would just like to, you know, let you folks know, and I have a handout I'd be glad to give to you if you'd like them, or I can leave them here on the table as far as that's concerned, about the further acquisition by a government entity as to the available property that's out there and what that would be doing in the future for taking it away from possible purchase from another individual. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, questions? Commissioner Aikenson.
I have a question for Emily Freiling. It looks like from the map that we have, you're a landowner that's along the access road to Edmonds Well, is that correct? What have you felt about the use on that road for people that have been involved with this sanctuary educational programs over the last few years? Have you seen that was excessive activity on the road, or what's your perspective on that?
I recently purchased the property. It was May of last year. I take my camper down there. I'm not there. There's not a house on the property. I'm not there year round.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to see any use on that road when I've been there. I am there frequently.
Mm-hmm.
So the use as it stands now is acceptable because there's not a lot. There's hardly any use currently. Yes.
Okay. And so is your concern primarily that there would be a lot of traffic and
Absolutely.
lack of privacy issues?
Yes, not only for my property, but all the properties along Carlin and up Sheffield. Just the impact to the road, the impact to the peacefulness of that upper area.
And so there's already a lot of hunter activity because of the wildlife area. Are you thinking in the broader Sheffield Road that would also increase there, even though there's already a lot of recreational use of the wildlife area as is?
It's, if I understand your question statement, yes, the increase would direct traffic along Carlin and up Sheffield to whichever access road is easements are finally established. If this goes through, it definitely would impact my land. And
Yes,
Yeah,
and
Commissioner
I'd like to
Anderson.
hear your comment on that too.
Yes, so I've lived down Sheffield Road at our family's properties all my life, and I will say that, yes, just to summarize, very infrequent use on the existing access road to the Edmunds property. As of right now, there is only one access road off of Sheffield Road to Edmunds property that goes through at least 3 different parcels or tax lots.
But not your property.
But not through our property, and so just to provide more information, there is infrequent use. I think that the question is that when it becomes if it becomes public land, that there would be increased traffic from hunters now directing their hunting activity to the Edmunds property, or fishing or bird watching. So we go from infrequent to frequent use.
Okay, thanks.
Other commissioners? Mr. Orietta, do you have, does your property, is it affected by the current access road?
It is not.
It is not.
Yes.
Okay. So you won't be impacted if this were to be approved by access considerations?
Nothing to do with access consideration.
Okay, so is your objection philosophical?
No, I mean, as far as access from Sheffield Road to the property, no, I won't be. As far as additional traffic coming down Carlin Road, I will, because I am a resident there on Carlin Road. And that was one of my concerns, is Carlin Road happens to be a paved road at this time, although the county doesn't see fit to do much maintenance on that road, and it's gonna deteriorate even more. And then Sheffield Road is a graded surface, a gravel surface. And of course, you know, the concern is there. You know, who's gonna bear those expenses? And from what I was told, the county was going to bear those expenses. And is that a concern of your folks? I don't know. Does the state have to worry about traffic planning, or is it just something that can be passed off to the county?
All right. Thank you, panel. Next up, Connie Orietta.
She was with me, she just wrote it.
Mr. Oregon State University himself, Dan Edge, and Ken Kessner. I kept this seat warm for you. Want to come back?
No, thanks. It's fascinating stuff, though.
We have one decline, because she was here with Mr.
Okay, then we'll have Carol Edmunds. That does it then. Ken Kessner. Okay, Mrs. Orietta, we'll start with you. Oh, no, she's not coming, she declined. All right, you're Carol Edmunds. Got it. All right, now we'll start with you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Chair Finley. Commissioners, good morning. For the record, my name is Dan Edge. I'm from Corvallis, Oregon. I work at Oregon State University. I'm here to support the acquisition of the Edmunds Well Wildlife Area. Excuse me. I've served on the board of the Edmunds Well Wildlife Area since 2002 and have a strong interest in making sure that the vision that Don and Carol Edmunds had for promoting wildlife habitat and providing access to disadvantaged youth to outdoor educational activities is maintained. Carol has gotten to the stage in life where she would like to, I think, shed some responsibilities for trying to offer these educational activities for disadvantaged youth. And we've been trying to help her over the years in deciding how to manage this property and offer the best opportunities. I think, to me, looking at the property, there are 3 or 4 important reasons that you might consider this purchase. First, it's pretty remarkable habitat. If you haven't been out there, I encourage you to get out there. The wetlands area, it's remarkable. And the artesian well, the water just flows out of the ground. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. And the development of the ponds, I think the habitat perfectly represents what the Ruby pipeline mitigation program was supposed to be purchasing from the standpoint of riparian wetland habitats. I think it complements the Summer Lake Wildlife Management Area's goals and activities and provides an important addition to those properties. I think the point that Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife might be well suited for being able to provide some outreach and educational opportunities is also an important opportunity that aligns quite well with what Don and Carol's original goals and missions were. The Fin and Feather Lodge, I think, would provide a great facility for doing that, and would be a great bunkhouse for visitors or perhaps summer interns that the agency might have working at the summer lake. And so it seems like, to me, a very worthwhile purchase for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Kestner.
Good morning to all. I'm Ken Kestner, one of the county commissioners of 3. There is a division between the 3 commissioners. I presented to the other 2 commissioners for the Board of Commissioners to have a discussion and come with the Board of, and that was not fulfilled. So I'm here as an individual commissioner. Overall, I'm very favorable, and I'll get to the reasons why. There is some mixed concerns of funding and road use and things of that nature. My background, family farm raised, college BS degree in biology, graduate studies in biology, 30 years with the federal government, mainly as a fish and wildlife biologist. So I recognize the importance of wetlands and the loss of it over the years. Lake County is predominantly 78% publicly owned, 70% being federal lands, 6% being state, 2% being local government. So there is a concern with private property going into public ownership. However, with the tax base maintained, at least for the ground base, that's offset the concerns. The biggest concern or emphasis I have is what the Edmunds have done for kids. One is maintaining wildlife, but the educational aspect for the kids from the larger urban areas. I'm also a strong supporter of urban-rural divide mending. In other words, get folks from the cities, the kids, whatever, out to the rural Lake County and gain appreciation. We have to be a partner with all the kids, or population, urban and rural. So my position, like I said, it's mixed, but I keep coming back to one thing, and that's the public good in the long term of education and getting kids educated up and appreciating wildlife, and that's very important for our wildlife resources in the future.
All right. Thank you very much. Mrs. Edmunds.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Carol Edmunds. I'm Don Edmunds' wife and also trustee of the Donald R. Edmunds Trust. I hope all of you have had an opportunity to review and read my 2 letters in your packets in favor of this acquisition. 31 years ago, Don Edmunds purchased the first of 4 160-acre parcels in the Summer Lake Basin. Don was a man with a mission and a man with a dream. His dream was to carve a man-made wetlands out of the Alpine Summer Lake Basin. His dream was also to develop a wildlife sanctuary that would be a safe haven for disadvantaged youth and wildlife. For the next 20 years, he devoted his life to making this wildlife sanctuary. He overcame unbelievable medical obstacles to achieve this dream. He dug an artesian well that supplied 1,500 gallons of artesian water per minute to many of the ponds. There are actually 4 artesian wells on the property. All the water in the installed pipes and ditches run by gravity flow. Every year, thousands of ducks and geese and swans visit the sanctuary. There is over 300 acres of water-influenced riparian areas for birds to feed, nest, or just rest. All of the construction work on the sanctuary has been done by Don and Carol Edmunds. Don invested over $1 million of his own money in this sanctuary development. We also had financial assistance from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Access and Habitat Program, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Land Management, Oregon Wetlands, and Wildlife Association. These organizations contributed around $120,000. Since the inception of this project, Marty St. Louis, manager of the Summer Lake Wildlife Area, and we have worked as a team. Marty and his Summer Lake staff have trapped and banded ducks. They performed many bird counts. They've helped with habitat development. They've worked with many of the visiting youth clubs. That Marty has helped me with many physical jobs that were a little too much for me to handle. In 2001, we formed a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Edmonds Well Wildlife Sanctuary. Don leased the 560 acres to the nonprofit for $1 a year. With donated dollars, we, the nonprofit, could build the Fin and Feather Lodge that sleeps 12, the activity center, and pay for the sanctuary expenses. Every year, we've had 200 plus youth visit and stay at the wildlife sanctuary. They would stay from 2 to 7 days. Some youth have never been outside their own city limits, and they've never experienced wildlife firsthand. October the 7th, 2007, Don Edmunds passed away, leaving Edmonds Well Wildlife as his legacy. He wanted it to stay as a wildlife sanctuary in perpetuity. For the past 11 years, I have managed every aspect of the sanctuary.
Mrs. Edmonds, you're out of time. If you could summarize, please.
Yes, thank you. I realize this is a little too much for me to take care of. 3.5 years ago, I asked ODFW if they would buy it. We signed a purchase agreement. I'd like to thank all of the ODFW staff who have helped during this acquisition process. It's a beautiful man-made wetlands carved out of the alpine Summer Lake Desert. This acquisition is important to Don Edmunds, his family, and sanctuary supporters. And I sincerely hope that you, the ODFW commissioners, will vote in favor of this acquisition to buy Edmonds Well Wildlife Sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Buckmaster.
Thank you, all three of you. I have a question for Dan. Does the 501c3 that you sit on the board, are they still paying their $1 per year?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, yes, I believe we are.
Correction if that's not true.
I'm a misinformed board member.
Well, my question is really, what relationship ongoing is there any encumbrance with the 501c3 and the does the 501c3 have any entangling claims to the property going forward, or would it be dissolved? Would you like it to continue? I mean, I'm curious where it fits into the plan.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I'd like to defer to Carol on that.
When we signed purchase sale agreement with ODFW, we were required to dissolve or get rid of all contracts that we had. And so the 501c3 contract is no longer in existence.
So Dan's out of the job. Well, thank you. That answers my question. Story of my life. Perfect.
Commissioner Aikenson.
I just had a comment for Carol. I had the pleasure of meeting you about, I think, 3 years ago and seeing your property, and it's really amazing what you and your husband have done on that piece of property, and it's really benefited wildlife as well as the young people that have spent time there. So thank you for that whole concept and making that happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Buckmaster.
Did Chairman Woolley have a chance to see the property when?
I think so.
It's unfortunate that he's not here. Yes.
I discussed it with him on the phone, but Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster for the regular financial for city and the East Region Manager. I did discuss it with him on the phone. I don't believe he had seen it, but he was well aware of it.
And Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, he did mention to me he has seen it previously.
Well, it's just that I felt it's unfortunate that he's missing this meeting because he is so committed to the involving rural or urban youth and the outdoors and programs similar. I think his heart is where the purpose of the Edmunds Wells property is. So, okay, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Kestner, I'm looking at the tax lot map, and does Lake County zone this area? I see some ranches, I see a trout farm, a rather small subdivision on Carlson Road. Is there a zoning? What has the county done to that area in terms of operation and maintenance by commercial activity? I would assume a ranch is a commercial activity.
But the Carlin Lane and Lakeview Lane are residential zones, obviously. But most of the land out there would be agricultural.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, panel, thank you very much.
So Trevor, would you like to come back up? Bruce, why don't you join him?
My apologies, I thought there were 7. So,
Thoughts? Commissioner Aikenson.
I had a question about the water. With the artesian wells, were those water rights prior to the Edmunds owning the property, or were those developed when they had the property?
Chairman, Commissioners, I do not think that they were acquired with the property because they did develop all water on the property. So I believe that was, sorry, I'm way too close. I believe that those were developed on the property, but Carol may be the best to answer that.
Well, my main question was, what happens to the water that goes into those ponds? Does it flow off the property, and what happens to that water from there?
So the water on the ponds is, the water right itself is for fish and wildlife. It does flow off, and I believe it flows into what's known as the BLM Ditch to serve water users downstream. Now, I'm not certain if that's all of it, but again, that may be something that Carol could clear up if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Do you have another one? We had heard some concerns in testimony about road maintenance and the cost of road maintenance and who would bear any resulting impacts if there were to be increased traffic on that road. So tell me about that.
Chairman Finley, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife often has roads that are either heading into wildlife areas or housed on wildlife areas. We do quite a bit to maintain those roads on our own. We also work with any adjoining neighbors or anybody that may be impacted by those to find out where we can either modify any management we have on the property, or if we have any resources that could provide some opportunity to mitigate those concerns or actual impacts.
Are there ways, looking on this map, to mitigate that concern by using some of the federal lands, the BLM lands, for partial access, a piece of road, or?
Chair Finley, we are exploring all opportunities and trying to find the best option for the department for access on that. As you know, there is an easement, current easement that is access to the property now. We are looking at all avenues with that, and we have considered them.
Okay. I read in some of the written correspondence about concerns of how we would manage the water. You described it going into the BLM ditch. If that's the current status, would any of the proposed uses of the refuge result in any impact on any neighbors, or probably would it continue to go to the BLM ditch?
Yeah, so as a water right user in the state of Oregon, we would be held to the same standards of everybody using a water right. On top of that, though, our use is non-consumptive. It's for fish and wildlife values, and therefore would, for the majority of, there would be no addition of use by our operations as to what's currently on the property.
All right. Commissioner Weber.
I guess there was some suggestion that we were in violation of some Lake County rules, and I'm assuming that we are, as far as you can be, comfortable or confident in compliance with all county, state, federal rules and regulations. Is that correct?
Chair Finley, Commissioner, yeah, just to speak to two parts of that. The ODFW plan for Summer Lake Wildlife Area, as you were shown, the acquisition itself is a department acquisition to be incorporated into the wildlife area. So this is not the wildlife area's plan that's leading this opportunity. Secondly, the county, we approached the county. We have been very open and inclusive, trying to gain support or find out if there is opposition that should make us reconsider. So I'm not certain, even reading that we haven't done that, but that's just would be my perspective of it, if that helps.
And I'm also assuming that ODFW would anticipate expenses in the future in addition to the purchase price for road maintenance, building maintenance, those sorts of things.
Chair Finley, Commissioner, yes, a lot of our wildlife areas are greatly funded by the Pittman and Robertson Act, which is excise tax based on ammunitions and firearms. And with any wildlife area, we would be looking to garner funds that would be able to maintain them and operate them. So this is being wrapped into the Summer Lake Wildlife Area would just bring it into a bit larger piece where we already zone it and prioritize areas that need to be worked on annually. It's a big enough property that we couldn't do that all at once. Summer Lake Wildlife Area is almost 20,000 acres total. So this would just be a portion of that where we would prioritize and make sure that we had funds that would allow us to maintain and work on issues as they came up.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
This property will change hands at some point in the future. One of the issues that has concerned me, I'm sympathetic to the position that we should be very suspect of taking private property back into the public domain, particularly in a state with such a high percentage of publicly owned property. The Woozy tract was easy for me because it had been on the market. It had tested the market. People, if anybody had wanted to purchase that land for grazing, wheat production, whatever, it had been on the market. It is my understanding that this property has never been on the market. I appreciate that the owner, Mrs. Edmunds, would like it to be preserved, but do we have any sense, has there been any outreach from other potential buyers that wanted to purchase this particular piece of property?
Chairman Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, to my knowledge, we have not been that information has not come to us. So if Carol has something that has been approached to her, I would let her answer that. But as far as the department, we have not seen any comments or correspondence that says that there was an interested buyer that we were either standing in front of.
Mrs. Edmonds, without breaching confidentiality, would you feel comfortable answering that question? Have you had other offers?
I have not had other offers, I've had other people come and talk, but there has not been another offer presented to me.
Okay, thank you.
It's my understanding there's a piece of property to the northeast of the Edmunds Wells that is a hunt club, is that correct? Potential uses for this property outside of what we've been talking about. Private hunting club, potentially, with traffic far exceeding what we're talking about, I would assume. So I was concerned going into, when Commissioner Bill and I visited the property, frankly, I was skeptical. You know, $1 million to increase the Summer Lake Wildlife Management Area by 3%. Seemed like a lot of money. The idea of the buildings, I saw them more as a liability because of, you know, they will have to be maintained. But then, and I paid attention to the complaints by some people. Honestly, the one letter from the commissioner, one of the commissioners who isn't here, who said he was representing a consensus, I discounted that because there clearly is not a consensus. But there is a concern. Then I thought about the opportunities. I called Dr. Edge and talked to him about his experience with it. I thought about all the things that we are trying to do to attract youth, urban youth. I wish we had the time, or we could have thought more. Pardon me, that was supposed to be off. So, hello. Anyway, it's from Klamath Falls. So, anyway, I think we turn that off so it doesn't happen again. There you go. So anyway, having seen it, I think the opportunities there outweigh the disadvantages. And but if we were to move forward on this, I would hope to see a comprehensive plan. I think my vote would be contingent on the promise of staff to produce a comprehensive plan that involved education and use. We're talking to people at OSU, getting a few of Dan's interns over there, working with with I&E, working with Commissioner Woolley on some of his ideas, not just letting it sit there, but to actually be used for its intended purpose. So that's where I am.
I want to talk about the funding. So this isn't any appropriated tax dollars from the state legislature to buy this property, am I correct?
Chairman Finley, you are correct. The money, the Ruby Pipeline mitigation money was given to the department under the habitat mitigation policy in the way of $2 million. Not, the entire $2 million is not available. But yes, this would be used to expend that monies, as well as a match with PR dollars. So.
Okay. All right. I had just seen a couple of comments about that, and when I read the briefing paper, I just wanted to reaffirm that that was correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Chairman, are in lieu of tax payments equivalent dollar to dollar to the taxes that are currently being paid on any piece of property?
Chairman Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I'll defer to Karen on that. Karen's our realty specialist for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yes, they are. We pay the same amount as a private assessed owner.
Okay, so there will be no loss to the county coffers as far as tax base.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Weber.
Remember we say there's no tax money here, but Pittman-Robertson is excise tax money that the federal government collects and gives to us.
Yes.
So there are some sort of tax dollars, but they're not out of Lake.
The way I understood the question was
Yeah.
Oregon legislature.
Yes.
Well, I pay excise tax, being from Oregon, that the federal government hopefully pays us back.
That's hunter funding.
Yeah.
I apologize if I misunderstood that, but
No, I think you were answering what
My
the
question.
question was, but I want to point out that there were other tax resources.
Okay. Commissioners, any other further? Thank you. I think, Trevor, we're just going to debate the issue between ourselves. But why don't you stay there just in case? All right, any further discussion, commissioners? Commissioner Weber.
I would just say that when the former chair comes up and tells us what we should do, Dan, I tend to listen carefully, and since I was the newbie on that end of the table, at that point in time, I respect very much his opinion. I've looked at all of the, I guess, arguments against it. I can certainly understand that the local property owners are concerned about change, but I think that we can mitigate that to the point that it isn't going to be of any significant impact on them. So I would be supportive of this acquisition.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question.
I've got one.
Okay, Commissioner.
How long has this acquisition been? How long you guys been working on this? How long has it taken to get to this point?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Biddle, I believe there are some dates back 3.5 years maybe for conversation, but the actual agreement and time frame has been a little better than 1.5 years. So I think it started in the beginning of 2017 with a, yeah. And again, that might be something Karen could best answer, depending on what timelines actually made it official or not.
So this has been quite a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
So, you made a comment that you've had a couple deals in the works and they've fallen through, and is that kind of been a timeline because it moves so slow with the department?
No, I don't believe so. And again, I'm not as familiar with those. I was not in this position when they came about, but one of them was a partner agreement to purchase property in the Warner Valley, which is east of Lakeview. That one sounded like they were within some of the partner transactions, as well as some of the property owners over there backed out. And again, it was a much bigger purchase by numerous agencies. And then the other one, I'm not certain if it was a time frame that that caused that or not.
So when we visited you, you guys over there looking at this property, you'd mentioned that there was, quite a few outreaches to the community and how they felt about it. Was that didn't you mention almost a 2-year process? Or did you I feel like you exhausted all your avenues to make sure that, you know, you're kind of accepted through this deal?
Chairman Finley, Commissioner Biddle, we have, so again, back in 2017, the beginning, we had approached the county on numerous occasions, as well as had a community meeting in Summer Lake in early 2017. And then we had our follow-up community public meeting in May of this year to talk to the community then as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
Might be an aside. I was describing the visit with Commissioner William talking about the property to my better conscience, Mrs. B, who asked me about, she goes, well, are there any carbon credits that are available at, with that kind of wetland area? And then I said, well, I don't know. I don't even know if the department does carbon credits at the Summer Lake or any of our wetland areas or where the department is on carbon credit. And she said, well, that's simply unacceptable. So you've got to fix that. So anyway, what are we doing on, does ODFW do anything with carbon credits? And if so, does this small acquisition have any potential?
Chair Finley and Commissioner Buckmaster, I have no idea. I mean, if you would like us to put together something on what the department is doing relative to carbon credits, I would be happy to work to get something back to you.
Well, you know, as our real estate, are you aware of anything? Is anybody aware of anything?
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I think you'll hear a lot about carbon credits in this legislative session. I know the department hasn't sold any of their carbon credits to any developer or the state. What we're talking about as a state is what that looks like, how you develop the calculation, and what the open market is. So until that's set, there hasn't been a lot of movement from anyone on it. I know there is one project near the Coos area that was set up to do that. I don't think it's been very functional without having that state framework behind it.
Well, I know we do own a number of properties that would have, to some extent, the potential for carbon credits, certainly our wetlands and all that. So anyway, it would be nice at least to have enough to offset the cost of fuel for Holly and I to get here to the meetings.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I think it's another good idea.
Okay. All right, commissioners. Any more discussion? Otherwise, we're going to call the question. Okay, I need a motion. Or I can make it myself.
I move to approve the acquisition of the Edmunds Wells property, including the required access easements and direct staff to proceed to escrow closing upon completion of all processes required under Oregon law for land acquisition.
I second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Weber and seconded by Commissioner Aikenson. Final discussion, any other thoughts? Commissioner Buckmaster.
Well, I would not suggest we do amend the motion. I would like a sense of the commission as far as putting together a plan on utilizing the property in a reasonable period of time, whether that's a year, 2 years, but certainly a directive to staff that we want to see that.
Chair Finley?
Comfortable with that?
We would do that anyway as part of the redevelopment of the Summer Lake Wildlife Area Plan. So the comment is duly noted.
Thanks, Bruce.
And do that.
We're gonna hold you to that, Bruce.
Please do.
Okay, all in favor of the motion and the second, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 5 commissioners present. Thank you all who came to share your knowledge and information. We're going to move on to Exhibit D. No, that's not Exhibit D.
Exhibit E.
Exhibit E. Salvage of road-struck deer and elk. Just 4 months. Brian Wolfer. Ready for you, Brian.
I'm trying to get us.
So, Dan, I understand all the respect and stuff they had for you and in your wisdom. I never heard any of that about me.
Sorry, I can't help it.
He's digging too fast. He's in a hole.
Thanks.
See you later. That could be a bad deal.
I think he's out. Salvage. Speaking of salvage.
Go ahead, Brian, and start.
Chair Finley, Deputy Director Hearn, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brian Wolfer. I'm the agency's South Willamette Watershed District Manager stationed in Corvallis. I'm here today to talk to you about roadkill salvage. To begin, I do fully recognize that what we're talking about is animals killed by motor vehicle collisions, and roads don't actually kill the animal. But in terms of using the common language, roadkill is a common term for this, and so if I use that, I'm talking about vehicle collisions with animals. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of the need and the history of salvage in Oregon. I'll discuss Senate Bill 372, and then I'll discuss the proposed administrative rules that you have a copy of there. To begin with, currently salvage is not allowed in Oregon for big game animals, for road struck or vehicle killed animals. There's a number of rules and statutes that factor into that. First, in OAR 635, Division 65, there's a rule that prohibits the possession of big game animals found or killed for humane reasons. There's some exceptions for shed antlers and some parts, but not for possession of, general possession of big game animals by individuals. For animals that come into the department's possession, Division 2 directs the disposal of edible wildlife, and so within that, we don't have an avenue to turn animal carcasses over to the general public unless it's a needy individual or it's a charitable organization. And then further, there's a statute 619.095 that requires a game meat inspection anytime we're donating edible wildlife to, or edible deer and elk in particular, to a charitable organization. So when you factor in those rules, it's very uncommon that roadkill big game is salvaged in Oregon. From a timing perspective, the amount of time that it takes to do inspections and to salvage animals, especially when you're looking at pieces of animals that may not be salvageable, it's just something that doesn't commonly happen unless we're looking at larger animals like elk, and occasionally there is some salvage that goes on there through charitable organizations. Most animals that are struck and killed by the road, on the road, are removed by road maintenance personnel, either state, county, city, and they're removed for traffic safety reasons and sanitation reasons. Occasionally, animals are left along the road to decompose, or animals make it off the roadway where they're not found and they decompose there. So in the 2017 Legislative Assembly, Senate Bill 372 was passed, and this Senate bill directed the development of a process to allow for salvage of deer and elk that are killed in motor vehicle collisions on Oregon's roadways. There's some key points to this Senate bill that I need to let you know about. First, this Senate bill is specific to deer and elk, so we're not talking about other big game species. Specifically, it's deer and elk. The purpose of this Senate bill was to allow salvage for human consumption, not for other purposes. The Senate bill stated that these animals must have been accidentally killed as a result of the vehicle collision. And the direction that the commission has and the agency has is that the task is to prescribe the form and method that citizens would apply for a salvage permit, to prescribe the terms and conditions of that salvage permit. Additional requirements under the Senate bill is the prompt surrender of any antlers from antlered animals, and so those surrenders would be to the department. Continuing on with some additional key points from the Senate bill, Oregon does have a statute that allows citizens to dispatch crippled and helpless wildlife, and that is Oregon Revised Statute 498.016. And so this Senate bill requires that if a crippled deer or elk that was injured in a vehicle collision is killed pursuant to 498.016, that animal can still be salvaged, but can only be salvaged by the driver of the vehicle that was involved in the collision. That existing law that allows for the killing of crippled wildlife for humane reasons, that does require an immediate reporting to someone authorized to enforce the wildlife laws. And so that is set within the Senate bill. Further, the Senate bill goes on to state that the state of Oregon is not liable for loss or damage from activities involving the salvage or consumption of meat from these animals. We have a deadline to implement this program by January 1 of 2019. There is a requirement that we report back to the legislature in their 2023 legislative assembly. So as we see what's working, have areas for potential improvement, those will be included in a report to the Legislative Assembly in 2023. And this does have a sunset of January 1, 2024 if it is not extended. So moving on to our rule development, there was an internal group of ODFW and OSP staff that initially met to discuss the implementation of Senate Bill 372. And we looked at a number of things. First, we looked at the effects on existing administrative rules. Many of our administrative rules are written with the assumption that big game is going to be acquired through hunting seasons. And so we had to look at how this was going to impact some of those existing rules. We had to look at the decision authority that the agency has and that the commission has. We considered impacts to poaching and activities or steps that could be taken to reduce the potential for this increasing poaching activities. We looked at other states because this is something that's new to Oregon, but a number of other states have salvage programs. So we looked at states like Washington, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Arizona, and looked at the type of salvage programs they have and the things that they've done to implement salvage in those states. Understanding that Oregon is unique and we have a unique Senate bill that we have to meet. And then we looked at the agency capacity to implement this program. What's it going to take staff-wise and what can we handle? Because this Senate bill does not authorize the charging of permits for salvage. This is something that we're going to have to implement within our existing staffs and budgets. So we developed some draft rules based on these items, and we took those rules to outside groups like Oregon Hunters Association. We had discussions with Oregon Department of Transportation, and we talked with Oregon tribes also. So the proposed rules that you have in front of you spell out what the application process would look like. We're looking at an online permit application. We would like to incorporate this within our electronic license system, and that will happen possibly not immediately, but down the road. And the reason for that is because it would allow some real-time examination of permits by state police because they'll have access to that system. And so this would be an online system that a person would go to our website and they'd be able to fill out an application for a permit. And they would have to do that within 24 hours of taking possession of the carcass. And so there would be a time period there where a person could pick something up and then return to their home and get online and fill out a permit application. The proposed rules dictate the type of information that we would require with that. We'd require contact information for the person conducting the salvage. We'd require location and time of salvage. We'd need to know the species and the sex of the animal that's being salvaged. And we'd need to know the identity of the driver, if it's known, to ensure that we're meeting the requirements that if an animal is put down for humane reasons because it was crippled, that it's only the driver that's obtaining the salvage permit. And then we also would have an acknowledgement that the state is not liable and the salvage would be at your own risk. So there's some requirements that we felt would need to be within these administrative rules because of the way the Senate bill's written and other existing laws and rules. So first, this salvage is restricted to deer and elk only. The vehicle collision must be accidental. This is not a license to intentionally hit animals. White-tailed deer in Western Oregon, we have Columbian white-tailed deer in Western Oregon. This is a species that is federally protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act, and so we don't have the authority to let people possess carcasses of Columbian white-tailed deer, except within Douglas County, where the Douglas County population has been delisted. And so this rule would include a prohibition on salvaging white-tailed deer in Western Oregon, except within Douglas County. Further, as the statute requires, as the Senate bill requires, if the animal is crippled by the vehicle collision and then killed, only the driver would be able to salvage that carcass. And we have within the rules that an immediate notification of a person authorized to enforce the wildlife laws would need to occur consistent with the crippled and helpless wildlife statute. And also, salvage would not be authorized on tribal reservation lands. There's some additional permit conditions that we felt would be beneficial for this program. First, a requirement that the entire head be surrendered for all animals salvaged within 5 business days at a location determined by the department. The intent would be our district offices, most of our field offices, but we might need to allow some additional department locations to accept heads. This would meet the requirement that all antlers be promptly surrendered. And would also ensure that people didn't get an animal home, an antlered animal home, without being seen, fill out a permit, and claim that the animal was antlerless to avoid having to turn in the antlers. More importantly, though, this also would support our chronic wasting disease surveillance efforts. Chronic wasting disease is a disease that does not currently exist in Oregon, to the best of our knowledge. And in states where this does exist, we know that the nature of this disease causes neurologic issues with cervids and deer and elk, and these animals are more susceptible to being hit by vehicles than healthy animals. And so we're currently conducting a lot of chronic wasting disease surveillance through sampling of hunter-harvested animals. This ensures that we can also sample from road-struck animals in a way that would increase the likelihood that we would detect CWD early if it showed up in the state. We also believe it would be appropriate to require that the entire carcass, including the entrails, be removed from the road and road right-of-way. This would prevent additional collisions and death to scavenging animals and help reduce increased public safety concerns. The proposed rules stipulate that no portion of the salvaged animals may be sold, and this is because the intent of this is to salvage animals for consumption. And then there's a provision that would allow the transfer of parts to another person with a written record. And this is similar to what happens with hunter-harvested animals, where you can transfer parts of that animal to somebody else with a written record of transfer. Only these rules essentially replace the license and tag number with a permit number if that were to happen. So there's a trail of where this animal ended up and how a person came to acquire parts of it. Some additional information that I need to make clear is, first, Our intention is that staff will not be inspecting carcasses that are salvaged. These carcasses will be salvaged at a person's own risk. And so we will not be having our staff conduct an inspection and telling people if we believe it's edible or not edible. This is something that people are gonna have to make their own decision on. We will have on our website some information, including frequently asked questions. And within that, these salvage rules do not supersede other laws and rules, including things such as trespass. So if an animal gets hit on the road and it makes it over a fence in a private property and dies there, these rules do not allow a person to enter that private property to recover the animal. Even though this rule does allow animals that are crippled and dispatched with a firearm to be salvaged by the driver, this does not supersede laws that prohibit the discharge of firearms on roads and road right-of-ways or within city limits. And then traffic safety laws will also still be in effect. And so educating the public about those types of issues will be part of our frequently asked questions and information on our webpage. With that, I can either step aside for public comment or.
We have no public comment.
Okay.
So commissioners, do you have any comments or questions? Commissioner Weber?
I was trying to figure out, if I was driving down the road, came upon a crippled animal alongside of the road, stopped, dispatched it in a humane way, then I wouldn't be eligible to salvage it because the unknown driver had left the area. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Chair Finley, Commissioner Weber, that is correct, and that is in the Senate bill. So we do not have the flexibility of allowing the non-driver or a non-driver to salvage an animal that was crippled and then dispatched. Anybody has the right to dispatch the animal, but only the driver can salvage it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Aikenson?
I was wondering what happens if the rules are not followed, for example, that someone salvages a deer and doesn't remove the entrails?
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Aikenson, that would be a violation of the administrative rules, and so that person would be subject to receiving citation from Oregon State Police or other law enforcement.
So that will be a new rule then, that this is required, so it is subject to citation.
Correct. This would be subject to a citation. It's a new rule currently. Salvage is not allowed. And so this is not a rule that hunters have when they're off the road and hunting, but this would be a rule that the entire carcass, including entrails, would need to be removed from the road and road right-of-way, so they'd have to retrieve that entire thing. One reason for that, as I mentioned, is to avoid secondary collisions. A second is in recognition that there are road maintenance crews that have to clear the roadway and remove carcasses, and to ask those folks to have to scoop up piles of entrails and things, just to me personally seems a bit unreasonable.
Okay. The second question, I was thinking of people that may want to salvage animals on the side of the road that might not have the capability to go online, either technical or physical opportunity to do that. Would there also be paper copies of these permits or an option to go to an ODFW office and have someone help them do that online process?
Okay. Chair Finley, Commissioner Aikenson, for people that do not have internet connectivity at home or otherwise, many of our district offices have kiosk machines where people can come to complete their hunter reporting and some of those other issues. And those kiosk machines do access the department web pages and websites, and so we could help people complete those applications there. At this point, we are not planning on having a paper option. Part of the reason is the timing, so we know that this animal's been salvaged within a 24-hour period. We also looked at our neighboring states, Washington being one that has a similar species to Oregon in terms of the species of deer, the species of elk. in Washington, in the first 2 years of their salvage program, they were averaging about 1,900 permits being issued a year. And so we're talking about the potential for a fairly large volume of permits to be issued.
Just seems like we do have a public that doesn't have that skill set to do that on their own. I'm just wondering how we accommodate them, but maybe through the offices, those people could get some help with that process then.
Yes, Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, as proposed, they would have to go to an office to get that help or have family or friends help them with that process.
Mr. Buckmaster.
Does Captain Samuels have any comment or recommendation on this particular issue?
I have a question for Captain Samuels.
I'm bringing a friend.
I'm glad you're here. I've always been troubled by dispatching an injured animal, because most times it's not out of the road right away. It's maybe in a ditch, or maybe just a little beyond the ditch. So how lenient or not lenient are your officers if someone were to call in and say, I just dispatched this animal? And then the officer arrives and says, well, you shot it here in the ditch. It's still within the road right away.
So for the record, my name's
You don't
Jeff.
have to give away official secrets.
My name's Jeff Samuels, Oregon State Police Fish and Wildlife Division, and Chair Finley, and Commissioners, and Deputy Director Hearn. The answer to that question is we're going to use officer discretion just like we do in any case that we come upon, and use our best judgment in dealing with that situation.
I assumed that, but I just, have that. I wanted to hear it. Any other questions of the state police? I know you were involved in this, and you've probably talked to your peers maybe in other states. Any issues brought up in the other states or that you're aware of, or things you're gonna keep an eye on? Because the question that I was gonna ask, and it's good while you're here, is I have this suspicion in my mind, and we limit sometimes the number of fish you can have per season or something like that. Was there discussion about on a maximum of like no more than 2 permits to an individual per year?
So,
You see a pattern of behavior developing with the same truck on the same road?
Same brush guard.
Yeah.
So, Chair Finley, that was a discussion item that we had, and there's a few reasons why we did not make that proposal. One is in recognition that if we have a limit per person, that still doesn't keep a family from getting permits in additional names. So you might have a husband get 2 permits, and a wife get 2 permits, and a kid get 2 permits, and another kid get 2 permits. And so it seemed like something that would be a little hard to enforce and meet those objectives. And the other thing that we discussed was whether or not recognition that oftentimes the entire animal may not be edible. And so even though a person may salvage 2 deer, if these are actually road struck deer, like the Senate bill intends, they may be getting half of that animal may be edible, maybe less. And so just in terms of a volume of meat, we're not looking at someone likely salvaging more than they can handle. But that is something that we can track, and we can make adjustments if necessary.
Just thinking of my cousins in Southern Oregon. I know them well. Okay.
I had
Any
one.
comment, Jeff?
So I was wondering if this is sort of like first come, first serve as far as somebody hits a deer, you go, oh, I want to salvage it, but I'm going to go change my clothes or get my pickup or whatever. They go and leave the site, someone else comes along and starts salvaging it, and the driver shows back up. Is it the person who's initiated the salvaging that gets to keep it? Or does the driver get to say, no, that's my deer because I hit it?
For the record, my name is Craig Heiberger, OSP Fish and Wildlife Division. And Chair Atkinson, it's a judgment call. If we arrive on scene, it's gonna be a kind of a he said, she said type situation. And we're just gonna have to use our best discretion to sort it out. We have had those situations in the past in hunting, where it was a legal take and they've split the deer or the elk. Maybe in this situation, they could do the same,
Okay.
part ways peacefully.
It does seem like there is a potential that some people will be driving the roads looking for deer to salvage. So I can imagine, people going out first thing in the morning to check and see if there's anything available.
Yeah, most definitely, we're anticipating that.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, to add to that, this Senate bill does not establish who gets priority to that animal unless the animal had to be put down. And so there is no, like in a hunting situation, the person that harvested the animal, that shot the animal is the only one with the right to the animal. This does allow the ability to salvage something that's found along the road, and it ends up being a bit of a first come, first serve for claiming that animal.
Okay.
Chair Finley, you did ask about our concerns, and so we do have, state police does have a concern and hopes that this bill and the pending rule, that particularly when bullets can be in animals from road struck deer and elk, that it's not an avenue for a poacher to claim that it was a road struck deer when it wasn't. And we'll be monitoring that closely. Like in Washington, you cannot retain a road struck animal that's been shot.
Yeah. That was one of the things that was secondary in my mind. And so thank you. It's a good way to camouflage it.
Run over the head.
Yep. Well, thank you both. It's always good to see the state police, and I know you're going to have an interesting time monitoring this, and okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? If not, I'm going to call the question.
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
So this came to us from the legislature. Do we have any option to not have a rule that does this?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, we do not have an option to not implement this program, and it is actually pretty prescriptive. Senator Hansel introduced this bill. He wanted this opportunity for Oregonians. The tricky part of it is 498.016, the humane statute, which you don't find typically in other states. And so Brian Wolfer and his team have done a really good job trying to put that into rule and shore up as best you can the concerns over legitimizing poaching. I will say, since you've given me the opportunity, the legislative body is willing to look at this again if we do see abuses and make changes to the statute if needed. But we're very limited in what we can do in rule right now.
That's what I was guessing. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but it just seemed like our alternatives aren't yes or no, it's how we implement it.
Very correct.
Commissioner Weber.
In thinking about this, if I came upon an animal with 2 or 3 broken legs, but nothing that's going to kill it immediately, I would have to, if I wanted, I could dispose of it and then leave it, or I'd have to wait there until it died before I could actually salvage it, which seems a little hard to understand why that would be, but it is what the law says. And I'm thinking if they were going to tweak it, they might do something along those lines.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Weber, I agree. That was the most challenging part. There is a statewide Facebook posting out there of animals, so you could post that animal and see if you could get a friend to immediately come get it and retrieve it and share it.
Well, that, Captain Samuels, will be really important for you to be able to download to us your experiences when this gets sunsetted and it's time to revise it, and, you know, those will be good lessons learned.
Chair Finley, we are gonna, capture that information. We currently are. We already have had some situations come up
Good.
of intentional strikes and have made cases.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
All right. Do I hear a motion? Okay, I'm gonna read it. I move to amend OAR Chapter 635, Division 002, 043, 065, and 200 as proposed by staff.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Finley and seconded by Commissioner Weber. Final thoughts? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the 5 commissioners present. Good work, guys. We'll see how this works. Okay, any other business before the commission here?
Chair, I do not believe we have any other business. I'll check.
No, all that I have is looking at some meeting locations for next year that I wanted to, I haven't secured facilities yet. But, in February, we're looking at being in Portland and doing the reception at the Sportsman Show again this year. And then April, I am looking at the Columbia Learning Center in St. Helens. And in June, I'm looking at the Gold Beach Library. They have a new facility down there that'll get us to those reaches. And then October, we're looking at the Four Rivers Cultural Center in Ontario.
What did you say on June?
In June. June was gonna be Gold Beach Library.
And when is Ontario?
Ontario is gonna be October. And I haven't secured those facilities yet, so they're not 100%, but we're ahead of the game enough, I think, to do that.
So I would like to ask the commission whether the Sportsman Show is still something you want to keep around those dates, or whether that's not that important to you.
Well, how important is it to our stakeholders?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think that the stakeholders like that opportunity.
Okay, all right. Let's just go with it for now. Go home and check your personal calendars and make sure that you don't have, you know, something, because we can move them now.
Yeah.
It's a little more difficult to move them later.
I just wanted to mention too to the commissioners, oh no, never mind.
Okay.
I thought I had something I don't.
Okay.
And just the other thing I want to mention is lunch will be ready at 11:30, so we are ending a little bit early. Folks can hang around and
Well, Commissioner Buckmaster said it would be 11:33, so how much was the bet, Commissioner?
The bet was for $100, but I have a few things I'd like to say.
Some minutes.
Oh.
So you just want to give me the $100?
You're just gonna manage, we're adjourned.
Did you salvage your bag?
They're holding it.